Good afternoon and welcome to another Reliability Roadmap Web Workshop. My name is Terrence O'Hanlon. I'm the publisher at Reliability Web and Uptime Magazine. It's my pleasure to be your host and your moderator for today. If you are looking for the webinar titled Building a Business Case for PAS-55 by James Nesbitt, Principal, Service Delivery Asset Performance Group, you are in the right place. Before we start today, we'd like to just remind you to take a moment to request your free subscription to Uptime Magazine, the magazine for maintenance and reliability professionals, available by request. All you have to do is log in to www.uptimemagazine.com. There's a little tab right on the bottom that says subscribe. You click it, you fill in the information, and it's as good as gold. And that's free of charge, by the way, www.uptimemagazine.com. Also, I would like to remind you that our next event is a condition monitoring summit, June 8th through the 11th at the Reliability Performance Institute in Fort Myers, Florida. There's free hotel included for early bird registrations, so check that out at www.maintenanceconference.com. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce James, who's doing the second PAS-55 webinar for us. And while he's doing that, we're going to ask the audience a couple of questions. So James has a, oopsie, what did I do there? Well, that one wasn't good. All right, wait a second. Does your organization have a written asset management policy? Just take a moment and let us know whether your organization has a written asset management policy. And then we'll get to James. We're going to give it about 5 more seconds. James, it looks like we got about 40 people on here live right now. 80% of them have indicated, and it's 55% say yes, they do have a written asset management policy. 45% say no, they do not have an asset management policy.
Wow, that's actually higher than I thought it would be, Terry.
Yeah, me too. Be interesting to dig in a little deeper to see what that really is all about. There you go. We see your slides perfectly, James. Welcome.
Okay, thanks, Terry.
Welcome, and thank you for being here, sharing your knowledge and experience with us.
Perfect. So it's all on me now?
It is all on you, my friend.
Thanks, Terry. I'm James Nesbitt with the Asset Performance Group. Today we're going to be talking about building a business case for PAS-55. Quickly, we're going to help you understand the benefits that are possible with better asset management. I'm going to be talking about benefits at all levels within the PAS-55 model. Some of them may be applicable to you and some of them may not. So as we go through this, try to understand if you think you can apply them to your organization. So what is PAS-55? PAS-55 is the publicly available specification. It was developed by the Institute of Asset Management in the UK, and it is administered and distributed by the British Standards Institute. The PAS is not a standard, it is a specification, so it doesn't have the same type of weight as a standard. What is asset management? So when we're talking about asset management, what is it that we're really talking about? So the context of asset management that I'm going to be talking about this afternoon is really about the successful stewardship of your physical asset base. We're not talking about financial assets. We're not talking about too much about human assets. We're talking about physical machine assets and balancing sustainable asset performance against cost. And of course, the variable in that is the risk. What risk are you willing to take in that balance? So the Institute of Asset Management defines it as a systematic and coordinated activities and practices through which an organization optimally and sustainably manages its assets and asset systems. And we'll get into the PAS-55 diagram in a minute here. A common misconception is that asset management is the maintenance department. Asset management is really a function, not a department within your organization. And it requires the input and the participation of all the departments that have a stake in the performance of the equipment. Operations is key. Maintenance, of course, has a large role. Engineering, human resources, finances, all have a stake in asset management. PAS-55. You can see here that the PAS-55 pyramid, the top of the pyramid is corporate organizational management, or the corporate goals. Where are we going? What is our strategy? PAS-55 does not define the corporate goals, but is, of course, aligned to it, and is the vehicle by which you obtain those organizational strategic goals. It is a top-down approach. It starts with an understanding of the organizational goals and determining the best maintenance strategy for the organization. Now, one thing that I'm often confronted with is James, isn't every organization's goal to get the most out of their assets that they can at the lowest cost? And I think at the core this is true, but we really need to understand the business model, the environment, factors such as market demands, how much redundancy do you have, what customer service level agreements are in place, what penalties are out there, what acquisitions and purchases that your organization is looking to do are all going to have an effect on how you manage your assets. And PAS-55 strives to help you manage that within a repeatable framework. So the three levels of PAS-55. The asset portfolio. Understanding how you're going to manage each of your asset portfolios, and you can have many, and balance the cost and the risk associated to each one. Life cycle costing, ensuring that you get the best whole life benefit out of your assets. Project funding, knowing where to put your effort, knowing where to fund, and where the low-hanging fruit really is. Managing the asset system. So what do we do with the assets that we have now? What is the best strategy given our market demands? Do I have a repeatable process, or am I really dependent on people? Managing my assets. Execution is key here. Doing what we said we were going to do. Getting out of a reactive environment and getting into a proactive environment. Managing our equipment rather than having our equipment manage us. And of course, measuring and reporting on that. And I'm going to talk quite a bit about measuring and reporting towards the end of this presentation, just simply because I've seen initiatives that have been less than successful, not because they were not producing results, but because they failed to report and blow their own horn on the benefits they were getting. So what's the first step? The first step is always assessment. The first step is always to understand, where am I now? Now, the Institute of Asset Management, which you can find it on the web, and I believe it is
TheIAM.org. THE.org. Yeah, IAM.org.
Yeah. So if you go there, you can actually find what they call the PAM, the PAM, which is really an assessment that has 121 different criteria that helps you look at your practices, your processes, your technology in an unbiased fashion, and allows you to measure against what they call good practices. And they're very specific around calling them good practices and not best practices, because they understand that there is some differences across industry, and what may be best for somebody may not be for everybody. So if we look at the top, this was really the top of the pyramid where PAS-55 started, managing your asset portfolio. So understanding what role each of your assets or asset bases play in your organization, and putting together a strategy and a management plan to manage each of them effectively within their own environment. One of the best examples I've seen of this is a large Canadian natural gas transporter. and they operated a rate of return natural gas pipeline in Canada, and for every dollar that they could justify in capital improvement or in preventative maintenance, they got a guaranteed return on based on their agreement and the regulation. They were very successful at that, and they started to expand a little bit. They started to buy some risk of revenue oil transportation in the United States, as well as some regulated and unregulated power generation plants. Some combined cycle, some coal, some nuclear, both in the United States and Canada. And their initial strategy was, well, we were good at maintenance in the one business, so we're just going to apply that to all the businesses. But because the revenue model and because the risk model in those new businesses was significantly different, they found that they were over-maintaining, and what they did for one, it wasn't necessarily good for all. And they found that by ratifying and understanding what their portfolio of assets were, what risk they were willing to take, as well as what the best model was for that market, they were able to leverage millions of dollars by doing maintenance and defining their strategy different based on the variables for the business. Life cycle costing. Life cycle costing is a core tenet of PAS-55. And life cycle costing strives to look at all the fixed and variable costs associated with owning an asset from the beginning to end of life. Now, as you can imagine, anybody that's been involved in life cycle costing, it's a very intensive process because you have to analyze what you're doing now, as well as understand some options for where you intend to go. And those options, you also have to understand, well, how am I going to maintain it? How am I going to operate it? How am I going to design it to get what I want out of it? The benefits can be huge, but the benefits are really in the acquisition or replacement of existing components. It doesn't really help you manage what you have now, only new or replacement equipment. If we push down a little bit further on the pyramid, managing the asset system. How do I manage what I have now? We coach our customers to look at it with this filter: cost, opportunity, return, and effort. Focusing on opportunity. Where can I get benefit from my organization? What form does it come in? What tools can I apply to leverage that benefit? How much is it going to cost me to apply those tools? Do I do it internally? Do I do it externally? Do I look at capital investment? Do I look at business process improvement? Are there tools such as RCM or FMEA or root cause failure analysis that I can leverage to help me get the benefit? So if we look at opportunity, we focus on the benefits that may be available in your organization. I break them down really into two broad categories, maybe three, depending on how you break up variable costs. But it's really more production, able to do more with the equipment that I have now, unlocking the hidden capacity of my equipment, and getting more with my existing investment. And the second component, of course, is reducing costs. And there's a number of ways. There's ways that I can reduce costs, either through labor or through material. If we look at the first component, productivity. If there is the ability to increase production and get a return on the increased production, the widgets or the energy or the transportation that I produce, this is usually the biggest bang for the buck, because this usually far outweighs the benefit that can be found by optimizing cost. So productivity. We look at productivity, machine availability. What sort of outages do I have? What's my reliability? What are the chances that my machine is going to run from scheduled outage to scheduled outage? What energy do I put into it? What wastes are associated with that? Do I have a lot of start-stops? Is there a way to really reduce the variation in my process and therefore increase the productivity and subsequently the revenue associated to it. Product quality. So sure, I may be available all the time and I may be running very, very fast, but am I getting the quality that I need? Am I taking penalties on the other side because of poor quality, or am I having to scrap or rework a lot of my product, which of course adds to my cost? And then machine speed. Am I maximizing the assets that I have now? I was at one customer and he said, James, no problem. I can get you better reliability. I can get you better availability. I'm just going to slow the machine way down. And we'll measure that and we'll all be happy. So it's the balance really of those three for productivity. Effectiveness. When I look at maintenance cost, I look at two things. Effectiveness, which we're going to talk about now, and efficiency, which is what we're going to talk about next. Effectiveness is doing the right work at the right time, or doing the minimum amount of maintenance to preserve the function of the equipment that I require. Right? So we're going to look at things like eliminating low and no value work. Eliminating the need to disturb a system that is otherwise stable, so less invasive maintenance and more on-condition type checks. Better leveraging of PDM programs. Often I'll come into an organization and they'll have bought a new vibration analytical machine or a new motor circuit analysis technology, and they broad brush it across the organization. And they typically do too much to begin with. How reactive is the organization? Is there a way to migrate some of the reactive work that is being done today into proactive work, which of course can be planned and scheduled and executed in a non-emergency fashion, and of course be done at a lower cost? People dependence. Do I have a proven, repeatable process that will allow me to sustain this performance in the long term, or am I dependent on people? Is most of my equipment knowledge and my operations knowledge and my maintenance knowledge in the heads of my personnel, or is it in a form that I can repeat regardless of the skilled person that's in place? And when we're talking about reactive versus proactive, and this is right work at the right time and effectiveness, doing proactive work is far cheaper than, or far less cost than doing reactive maintenance. And these sets of slides, I think, really illustrate that well. In a reactive environment, the equipment tells us when it failed, right? So the equipment is really scheduling the outage. And when the equipment fails, we have to identify what happened. We then have to get some people. We have to get some resources. We have to get some special equipment, or even specialty rentals, and get them on site in order to address it. We have to do the work, so we have people running around. Often we bring people in on contractors in, or we have to bring people in at overtime because these things don't always happen during the normal shift. Throughout this, we're planning, we're looking for what happened, we're sourcing parts, we're looking for the right procedure to do this. Of course, we're trying to determine things like lockout, tagout, and WMIS, or even dangerous goods if they may be required. And then afterwards, we may follow up, or more likely run off to the next emergency. So that means that our downtime was from the time the equipment said, hey, I'm down, to the time that my technician on overtime could get it running again. In a proactive environment, we look for conditions that are going to tell us that it's failing before it fails. It gives us an opportunity to plan and schedule in a calm, non-emergency environment. We can execute the work on a scheduled outage with the parts that we need and the tools being on place on the work site ready to use. And of course, we can follow up afterwards. This greatly reduces the amount of downtime that we have to take when the machine is not available for us to do what we need it to do. It also reduces the amount of secondary damage that may result of allowing equipment to just come to a screaming halt or to fail. Efficiency. So if we understand the right work at the right time and what to look for, well, can we do that work efficiently? What is our wrench time? How much time do our technicians and operators spend doing work, and how much time do they spend preparing for work? So things like materials are huge. Detailed resource part and execution procedures, again, trying to pull us away from being too people dependent. Employee skill development. Do we have an understanding of the skills that are required in order to do the work, and an understanding of where our employees are and the skills development that they need in order to be successful? When we're looking at efficiency, we're really looking at FTE, or full-time equivalent reductions. Can I do the work that needs to be done in a more efficient manner, perhaps lowering the number of FTEs? But in a lot of the organizations that I've seen, what they've done is over time they've cut the FTEs. They've cut the maintenance budget and cut the staff and kind of tried to do more with less, tried to become more lean, tried to reduce some deadwood, if you would. I've heard that term before. And what they often end up with is a poor understanding of the work that needs to be done and not enough people to do it. So what we'll often find is by becoming more effective, understanding what needs to be done, we can do the right amount of maintenance to maintain the equipment with the existing workforce, rather than having to increase them or continue to run around after the equipment. So what does that look like altogether? If we look at the impact of asset management, I love these slides. They have a great message. And we assume that the current production, or the OEE, the operating equipment efficiency number, is 60%. My profitability is 7.1, and my return on capital equipment is about 6.81. If I increase by 10% on my production, I can see about a $9 million increase in profit. I'm about twice as profitable as I was when I was 60%, and I almost doubled my return on capital equipment just by moving up 10% on OEE. Now, in order to get that same gain by changing my price, I'd have to increase my price by 6%. Now, 6% doesn't sound huge, but in most industries, due to the competitive nature and due to the already thin margins, a price increase just isn't possible. A price increase just isn't something that can be considered. So what most organizations will do is to try to cut maintenance costs. Can I cut maintenance costs in order to have a more favorable EBITDA or to show a better profit? Well, in order to do the same thing with a reduced maintenance cost, you'd have to reduce it by 95% in this case in order to get the same type of result. Now, unfortunately, this is a tack that I've seen a lot of organizations take, in that they reduce the maintenance budget, which reduces, of course, FTE and maybe even material spend, and they get some short-term benefit out of that. But really what they're doing is setting themselves up for some long-term pain. So when we understand the benefit, if you're able to go through there and pick off some things that may be applicable to your organization, effectiveness perhaps, efficiency, and maybe some unplanned downtime that you've been suffering. One of the important steps that you need to do in the business case is to understand exactly where it's coming from and the form that it's in. So here I've mocked up a paper machine. Headbox press, dryers, kitchen coder, calendar, and winder. And for each of those areas, you need to dive down and say, well, what is the opportunity there? What is the downtime associated to this piece of equipment or to this area? What are my material costs? What are my maintenance costs? If there's benefit there, what does it look like? And then, of course, what tools am I going to apply is the next step. These need to be SMART. You may have seen this acronym before: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. What am I going after? When do I expect to get it? What will it look like? we've talked about quantitative benefits. There's a number of qualitative benefits that come with increased asset management. And when I say qualitative, I'm saying they're not quantified. So things like safety or environmental compliance, of course, have huge financial impact should something go wrong. We typically don't quantify those, but we want to consider them. And those on their own are often drivers for better asset management. Due diligence, standardization of approach, having a common language across the organization, or even benchmarking where you are now so that you can continuously improve. Access to information and knowledge capture, standardized measurements of performance, and quality of life. I was actually at an organization yesterday that said, you know, all I want to see is a less flustered maintenance manager. I want somebody who's not reacting all the time, who's not firefighting. Okay. Effort. So we know where the opportunity is. We understand perhaps what it looks like and where it is. So what do I go after? And really what you need to do is develop a toolkit that's going to help you realize that benefit. If I'm looking for reduced maintenance cost, I'm going to apply this tool. If I'm looking for increased asset performance, I may apply this tool. If I'm looking to sustain asset performance, I may be looking at a business process improvement tool. Right? So understanding where the benefit is, understanding what it looks like, applying a criticality or risk or some sort of determination that tells you where the big hitters are, the Puerto principle. By addressing 20% of your problems, you may be able to get 80% of your benefit. And then building a roadmap that tells you how to get there, how long it's going to take, what it's going to cost. So if we're looking at effort, the goal of any improvement effort, including asset management, is to really affect two variables: the unit cost of doing the maintenance, the cost per unit produced, and the downtime rate, or the other side of that, my reliability of my equipment. I want to increase the reliability of my equipment, and I want to decrease the cost of maintenance and operations to produce whatever it is that I produce. So depending on what your benefit looks like, you're going to apply different tools. Business process improvement, for example, it's going to help you create repeatable processes, understand the SOPs, or the standard operating procedures for operating your equipment. Going to reduce the unit cost of production by having less variability in your process, and to have it repeatable, so I should have a lower downtime rate. PDM program. PDM programs are often put on to stop the bleeding. If I have a lot of problems with equipment reliability, I may set in a PDM program and just have them benchmark the entire asset base so I can start to see what sort of problems are coming in the future and start to prioritize them. So I'm going to have less downtime. This may have a positive effect on the unit cost of maintenance, but if I'm not careful and I broad brush it, I may actually increase the unit cost of maintenance, which in the short term might be the right strategy. RCM JA 1011, going to have an effect on downtime rate. If I don't understand my equipment, if I don't understand the correct maintenance strategy for my equipment or the operation strategy for my equipment, RCM is going to help me define that. I'm going to have a lower unit cost of maintenance, but the real benefit of RCM is in lower downtime rates. If I'm looking at reducing my cost of maintenance, I may just do something as simple as an FMEA, optimizing the existing program. If I'm happy with the performance, how can I maintain that performance at a lower overall rate? So FMEA or optimization may help me there. Root cause failure analysis. This is one of those broad ones that could go anywhere. Root cause failure analysis strives to eliminate the conditions associated to the failure and often result in redesigns. which is why there's such a broad swath in the results that you can get. But almost always, root cause failure analysis will result in more reliable equipment because they strive to eliminate the failure modes or the failures that have occurred from ever reoccurring again. Then, of course, engineering redesign. Again, an even broader swath, right? So depending on what you're doing, if you have the right determination of perhaps a bottleneck in your system or a new capital investment, engineering redesign may help you with that and affects both unit cost to production and downtime rate. Costs. When considering the costs of pursuing increased asset management as part of your business case, you want to quantify all of the costs. You want to take a look at your internal resource costs. What's it going to cost to divert resources to participate in business process improvement, to participate in Kaizen, to participate in root cause failure analysis? Do I have to backfill those employees? Am I going to have to give special training to the organization or a select few? Do I have to backfill in order to allow people to focus on new skills or new processes in the short term? What tools and technologies do I need to support that? Do I need new software? Do I need new tools in the field around vibration or alignment? Or maybe better machine operating tools and systems. Focus on those areas that have the most attractive effort to return ratio, the low-hanging fruit. Change management. One of the big tenets of PAS-55, of course, is that asset management isn't a silo. It isn't something unto itself. There are human drivers, information drivers that are going to affect your success. Financial drivers. Do you have the right amount of budget? Do you understand the costs, the availability and the value of the data in the organization sometimes plays a key role in determining what the best asset management path is. Sometimes getting your data in order is the first step in order to determine what needs to be done. And of course, we have business drivers that motivate us all and a desired outcome. This is where we're trying to go and what we're trying to produce. All of these should be considered when you're doing a business case. So the impact to the rest of the organization. Cost. Build an action plan and cost summary. I've seen a lot of improvement, whether it be a PAS-55 improvement, whether it be just simply a business process improvement or an RCM initiative, where they fail to put in stage gates. They fail to understand what the cost is, when that cost is going to be incurred, and balance that against the benefit. And they wait until they're done to see how successful they are. In order to be successful in a business case, you not only need to know what it's going to cost you to do it, but when you're going to spend that money and when you're going to see the benefit. So your timing of savings. What's my forecast? If we were going to start today or when we were going to start on the planned date and all the stars should align and our business case is reasonable, when do I expect to see the results? When's my break-even point, and what is my ROI at the end of the day? When can I expect to see diminishing returns? When should I stop? And then, of course, track the actual. I hinted at this at the beginning. I've seen a lot of improvement processes that are just viewed as the organization as overhead or as a cost because they're not doing a good enough job at reporting and tracking the benefit or the true benefit that they're having. Tracking actuals that are agreed to by the senior team and then reporting them on a monthly or a quarterly basis is the best tool that you can put in place in order to gather support and momentum to keep your project going and to keep reaping the benefit. And that's what I got. Terry, is there any questions?
Yes, that slide on the slide on opportunity showed parameters that apply directly to the manufacturing industries. Was it about OEE, overall equipment effectiveness? How do you translate to that up to the upstream oil and gas industry?
Yeah, the slide that I had there was directly on OEE. If I were to translate that onto oil and gas, one thing that comes to mind for me is I worked for a natural gas company in Canada for many years, and they had things. It was a rate of return type business, but what we put in place was incentive. So if we were able to save dollars on cost of service, maintenance, and operations, as well as reduced capital investment, because in a rate of return type business, if I can justify capital against the performance of a customer service level, well, then I get a rate of return on that. However, if I have an incentive agreement with my customers in place where the avoidance of capital actually benefits us both, well, now we're more of a partner than we were before, and we're both reaping the benefits of it.
There's a challenge for both you and me here. You're in the elevator with the CEO, and you have 30 seconds to say your piece. What would you say to keep him keen about the promise of PAS-55? Start now.
Well, I think that if I was looking at the promise of PAS-55, the one thing I would say is that we need to move maintenance and operations of our equipment to a strategic level rather than have it viewed as an overhead. And what PAS-55 does for us is it gives us a framework in which to put all of our improvement initiatives against. It's not something that we need to go. It's really the journey and the framework that's going to get us there, so that we can be sure that we reach the end goal, and that we understand how all of our initiatives act within one another. And I guess just saying it really fast helps me as well in that 30 seconds.
I may not be as slick as you are with your explanation, but what I would say if I was in an elevator for 30 seconds is that PAS-55 now provides us an opportunity to connect the asset management decisions and desires that are made at the executive suite with the asset management decisions that are made at the asset level, either at the enterprise or the plant level, that now there's a framework with PAS-55. And to me, one of the advantages as you go through getting PAS-55 compliant is that the questions that have to be answered by the executive suite related to asset management policy and asset management decision ultimately then will flow back down to the enterprise or the plant level, and what will result is a transparent decision-making process that's in total alignment, which I think is what you're referring to, between all parts of the company. I don't know if that made any sense or not.
It did.
What about aviation? Is there application for PAS-55 in aviation or aviation services?
Yes, and I think that's one of the misconceptions around PAS-55 is that it may be industry specific. I think you and I just both said that what the real value of PAS-55 is it provides that framework for improvement. It provides that roadmap or guidelines for the effective management of your existing and future assets. So it's applicable not only in the aviation industry, it's also applicable in any other industry.
We just had 63 companies down in Fort Lauderdale come, and it was amazing because there were pharmaceutical companies, biotech companies, food companies, oil and gas companies, in addition to the traditional heavier infrastructure-based water, wastewater, and some of the utility companies. And several of them saw the ways that PAS-55 could definitely apply. Somebody's asking about PAS-55 and would it be better than ISO 14244?
Well, I'm not sure about 14244. I know that the PAS-55 is really the framework for the ISO spec going forward. PAS-55, as I mentioned, is a specification, not a standard. But the Institute for Asset Management has formed a number of groups that will be working on the ISO spec using, of course, PAS-55 as a framework. Now, this is asset management, and this is maintenance, and this is operations. This isn't something new. And what they've done is they've taken these good and these common practices, and they've put them in a framework, and it's really taken what we all do and laid it out in a very common sense manner. And I think that when we start to see the new ISO specs around asset management, they're going to have the same flavor. Sure, they're still going to they may be a little bit more robust than the PAS-55 currently is, but it's going to be the same thought process. What do I need to do in order to get the most out of my assets, and how do I manage things like costs and risks?
And you know, I think just to amplify that, what do I do, meaning what elements do I need in place for asset management, not how do I do it. There is no how do I do it in PAS-55.
That's correct. That's right.
And
there's good practices, not best practices.
And operations and maintenance are only one or two elements within the management of an asset for its total life cycle. And yes, it is a total life cycle management view of your assets. My prediction is there will be positions created in companies called asset manager, whose primary job will be to ensure that the company gets what they want out of those assets from the day they're conceived to the day they're decommissioned.
By leveraging all aspects of that organization.
Yep, exactly right. Let's see. Are there any case studies that show the ROI that can be used for leverage?
Yeah, we actually have a number of case studies around asset management improvement, of course, within the framework of PAS-55. And the next webinar that we're going to do, Terry, is the water wastewater case study around applying the PAS-55 principles. So if you're interested in seeing specific examples, the June webinar would be a great place to start.
So in a public water agency, are you basically making the same statements that you made today? I mean, it's applicable regardless of whether it's a public agency or a private company.
Absolutely, but the definition of the benefit or the opportunity and how you go after it is different in most organizations. So in things like municipalities or water, wastewater, things like knowledge capture, things like a basis for maintenance program, standardization of process, standardization of procedure, those are all very, very important. If I'm looking at discrete manufacturing, well, maybe lowering the lowest maintenance cost at the highest production so that I can be competitive and eke out a margin on razor-thin profits, maybe where I'm looking for. So it's applicable to each, but understanding the demands for each of those organizations and which benefits are worth pursuing is going to be different across most.
So everybody's got to manage the classic cost, benefit, risk. I mean, or performance and risk, basically.
Absolutely.
But PAS-55 does not lay out a risk management standard, right?
That's right. PAS-55 is not there to say this is how you should do it, as you've mentioned. If they had the one answer, we'd all be doing it, right? There isn't one answer. It puts out a guideline for asset management and the application of good practices that may or may not apply to your industry or your organization or even your situation at this time.
The first PAS-55 webinar that James did is recorded. Just go up to Reliability Web and click Tutorials and then sort by Asset Management, and it'll come right up. You'll see it there. We'll move this one over there shortly. You will get a link, an email in a few hours here with the link to the recorded webinar. I will put James's email in there. If you want a copy of these slides, just send James an email. He'll send you a PDF or so. But the recorded version of this will be up also. Please make it a point to keep an eye open for the June webinar, Applying PAS-55 Principles, Water Wastewater Case Study. And James, thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and experience with us here today.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks for the opportunity.
My pleasure. This is Terry O'Hanlon, Reliability Web and Uptime Magazine, signing off.